destination a few minutes later than if she had been speeding and weaving in and out of traffic. But it is worth it because she arrives in a happy, calm state of mind. These are the situations we encounter, life's daily annoyances and frustrations. Whether it be the rudeness of a clerk in the store, the telemarketer we cannot get rid of, or the person at work who always argues with us. These are the real-life circumstances that we encounter countless times during the day. These are the very times that we should practice what the Buddha taught. If, in small everyday situations, we can start responding from the mind that is not swayed by emotions, the mind of sympathy and love, that is free of hatred and bitterness, we will be planting good seeds. These good seeds will mature into good conditions. With good conditions, we can continue to practice. Our practice of morality and of respecting and not harming others will further increase our good conditions. With such conditions, the bad seeds will not have the opportunity to mature, and we will not find ourselves in violent situations. Following the Buddha's advice, we can strive to never lose our clear, calm mind and never utter evil words, but instead treat others with a mind of sympathy and compassion, letting go of our anger. We will permeate the entire world with an awareness imbued with concern, unreserved, infinite, and free from hostility and ill will. Encountering situations that are potentially upsetting and that could make us angry, we should not give in to our destructive emotions. Our habitual recourse to that anger has resulted in the quarrels, fights, and wars that are engulfing our world today. Instead of mindlessly cultivating anger, recall the simile of the saw. If we can keep training our minds to be serene and to empathize with others, we will gradually uncover our wisdom and know how to be of help to others in any situation. Remember that upholding a calm, clear mind is usually easier to accomplish when we are not emotionally involved and when we do not have anything at stake. As we accomplish this in minor, everyday events, we will see that it works. This will give us the confidence to apply this same teaching in more trying situations. As with everything worthwhile, this will take time and require a lot of patience. But with time, we will develop this mind of serenity commiseration, and compassion. In another account from the sutras, we learn of one time when the Buddha was in Jeddah Grove Monastery. He asked the monastics how they would explain the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance to monks who followed other teachings. The monastics replied that they wished to explain as the Buddha would. So would he please teach them how to best explain these negative states of mind? He replied that greed arises from thinking of pleasant objects and situations in a mistaken way. Once greed has arisen, this thinking of pleasant things will cause it to intensify. Through our own personal experience, we can see what the Buddha meant. When we see an object or watch others enjoying an activity that we view as enjoyable, as pleasant, we want to own the object or undergo a similar experience. We want to possess a newer model of something we already own. We want to go to the same vacation spot a coworker visited. We want to indulge ourselves because we feel we deserve it, or because we want to cheer ourselves up after something disappointing has happened. And so we crave things and experiences. But as the Buddha explained, craving leads to suffering, for craving inexorably leads to more craving. Unquenchable, it grows like an addiction. The more we have and the more we experience, the more we want. Our ever-increasing greed results in our lives becoming more stressful as our craving for objects and experiences far surpasses our ability to obtain them. And so we fall deeper and deeper into suffering. Why does all this happen? It happens because we mistakenly think that pleasant things, be they material objects or experiences, will make us happy. But happiness is a mental state. Happiness is not a quality inherent in material possessions or experiences. Whether or not something makes us happy depends on what we tell ourselves. As Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That is, it is our thinking that makes us happy or sad. We can tell ourselves that to be happy we need more pleasant objects and situations. Or we can tell ourselves that wanting more inevitably leads to more wanting and thus to more suffering. Next, the Buddha explained that anger arises from thinking of unpleasant objects and situations in a mistaken way. Once anger arises as the result of such mistaken thinking, it increases. Again, our personal experience will bear this out. When we see an object or occurrence that we view as unpleasant, feelings of resentment, bitterness, and anger can easily arise. We want the experience to stop. We want to be rid of the undesirable object. We want the annoying person to go away. If only these would happen, then we would be happy. But such thinking, as the Buddha said, is mistaken. Just as the presence of objects and experiences does not necessarily make us happy, neither does their absence. Attempting to satisfy our emotional desires will not lead to happiness. In truth, wanting to stop that which is unpleasant only leads to more wanting, more emotional reactions, more turmoil, not happiness. Not yet realizing this, we continue to buy tickets to get back on our emotional roller coaster of wanting, attainment, disappointment, and anger. What should we do instead of falling back into this negative pattern? Previously, we learned of the Buddha urging the monastics to hold the thought, "My mind will never be shaken." In other words, our minds should remain stable and focused. We should neither feel attached to pleasant sensations, nor feel averse to those that are unpleasant. If we can accomplish this, we will remain content with what we have and calm in any circumstances. Content and calm, we will know how to act wisely. Our anger will gradually diminish and eventually cease to arise. The Buddha concluded by explaining that ignorance arises from wrong thoughts. Once ignorance has arisen, these wrong thoughts will cause ignorance to intensify. Understanding this, one would know how best to view properly both pleasant and unpleasant happenings. If one were able to act from this understanding, then greed and anger should not arise. And if they did, one would be able to eliminate the greed and overcome the anger. If one looks at life properly, ignorance should not arise. But if it should, one would be able to overcome it. Here the Buddha spoke about wrong thoughts. Wrong thoughts are our personal opinions which arise in response to external sensory stimuli. Relying on this sensory input, we think about what we have encountered and draw conclusions based on what we have seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. Then we begin to label some things good and others bad, some pleasant, others unpleasant. In other words, we begin to discriminate, seeing duality in everything. The fundamental flaw in this process is the reliance on our senses. What we fail to factor in is the fact that our breadth of exposure is minimal at best, and that our senses may well be faulty. Consider the Buddha's account of a group of men blind from birth trying to describe an elephant. Each of the men was taken to a different part of the elephant: its head, an ear, a tusk, its trunk, its stomach, a foot, its tail, and the tuft of its tail. The blind men, in turn, said the elephant was like a pot, a basket, a plowshare, a plow, a storehouse, a pillar, a pestle, and a brush. The men then began to argue with one another, and even came to blows over the matter. These reasonable but limited answers were the result of knowing only a part of the truth, not the whole. And sadly, like those blind men, most of us also encounter only a part of the truth. We too cling stubbornly to our own viewpoints, convinced that we have all the facts, and thinking that we have all the facts, and feeling confident of our conclusions, we reject the views of others. Thus, our ignorance arises from our wrong thoughts. The manifestation of our ignorance is our attachment to wrong thoughts, and this inevitably intensifies our ignorance. On another day, a monk who followed other teachings asked Venerable Ananda, "What happens to those who give in to the three poisons?" Ananda replied that those who give in to greed, anger, and ignorance will themselves become victims of those self-same poisons. Thus they harm themselves, not just others, and must face the painful outcomes of what they have done. Since greed will lead one to have impure thoughts and to engage in flawed behavior, those who rid themselves of greed do not undergo these painful outcomes. When our minds are impure, our thoughts arise from greed, anger, and ignorance. They also arise from arrogance, our belief that in some way we are superior to others. But the Buddha explained to us that we all have the same true nature. So while our past karmas result in our having lived different lives, and those lives may appear to be better than others, our current lives are only a tiny snapshot of our innumerable lifetimes. In this lifetime, we may be smarter or more privileged than other people. But these roles could be reversed in our next lifetime. And suddenly, those whom we deemed inferior to us will be superior. And our arrogance will come back to haunt us. As is said, pride goeth before the fall. Our thoughts may also arise from doubt. For example, we may doubt that we have the same true nature as a Buddha, and thus doubt our ability to, like him, awaken. We may doubt that causality functions all around us and within us, throughout all time and space. We may doubt that the mind of the Buddhas and the mind of all beings are all pervasive, that we are all one. Finally, our thoughts may arise from delusion, our belief in erroneous ideas. Due to all this greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, doubt, and delusion, our minds are filled with wandering, discriminating thoughts. We get caught up in thoughts of liking and disliking, of good or bad, favorable or unfavorable situations. No longer calm, no longer pure. Our minds are constantly affected by our environment. In this agitated, emotional state, we may or may not act out of good intentions. But even if we act out of our good intentions, they will often backfire because our logic was faulty to begin with. So we end up harming others and ourselves, mistaking right for wrong and wrong for right. We make bad decisions and must suffer the outcomes our actions have wrought. Not because someone judges this to be so, but because causality, cause and effect, is a universal, natural law. Our good intentions may mitigate the outcomes to some degree, but we will still have to undergo what we have brought about through our impure behavior. When we have overcome our greed, anger, and ignorance, we will not commit such offenses because we will no longer be deluded. We will no longer mistake wrong for right. Our minds will be clear and calm. Having let go of attachments, arrogance, and selfishness, we will no longer act from discriminations that result from faulty conclusions drawn from sensory input. Instead, we will act from our inherent wisdom. Ananda further explained to the monk that those who give in to greed do not understand what is meant by benefiting self, others, and all. Again, we can see from our experience that our craving is usually of a selfish nature. We want something either for ourselves or for those close to us. The satisfaction of this craving is a temporary sense indulgence that brings us short-lived happiness. The only way to truly benefit others is to awaken. In other words, to transcend the cycle of rebirth, whereby we obtain lasting liberation and genuine happiness. Unless we free ourselves from rebirth, we will not be liberated. As long as we remain within the cycle of rebirth, we are bound by craving and ignorance, and we will not find true liberation or happiness. In benefiting others, we move beyond thoughts of self to those of others. At this point, we will realize that all beings, not just ourselves, wish to eliminate suffering and attain happiness. With this realization, we will want to help others accomplish this. We will begin by wishing that those we love and care for would attain happiness. Gradually, we will keep expanding this wish until ultimately we wish for all beings to be free from suffering and attain happiness. When we shift the focus of our wish for happiness and liberation away from just ourselves, we will begin to think less of our own happiness. Instead of looking at everything in a self-centered way, we will transform our thoughts into those of caring for others. We will stop asking what is in it for us, and will instead ask, how can we help others? The concepts of benefiting others and benefiting ourselves occur at a lower level of realization. When our understanding reaches a higher level, we will realize that all beings are one, and there is no duality between self and others. To benefit one being is to benefit all beings. Therefore, to benefit others is to benefit oneself. Realizing this interconnectivity among all beings will enable us to realize that we do not need to worry about self-benefit, because when we help the whole, we help ourselves. So there is no need to worry about me. The more we can wholeheartedly aspire to help all beings, the more goodness we will generate. This goodness will in turn create favorable conditions that will enable us to help others. It is our craving that causes our suffering, because craving blinds us to reality and disturbs our pure mind, leaving our calm, clear state. We become embroiled in a cycle of wanting, obtaining, and then more wanting. The more agitated we become, the less we are able to concentrate, and the deeper we bury our wisdom inside us. Not able to reach our wisdom, we fall prey to ignorance and delusion. We become more afflicted, our worries increase. But this does not have to happen. We can be free of greed, anger, and ignorance through moral self-discipline. With moral discipline, our minds will be more settled, and we will be able to achieve meditative concentration. As this meditative concentration enables us to gain more control over our thoughts and consequently our emotions, we will begin to touch our innate wisdom. As we continue to act from that inherent wisdom, we will gradually rid ourselves of greed,